Are you enjoying this podcast? Well, you have KUOW members to thank for that. KUOW members make the trusted local journalism and storytelling you hear on this show possible. Become a member today and help support the production of this podcast. It only takes a minute. Make a donation at KUOW.org or follow the link in the show notes. And thanks.
Hey, KUOW politics reporter Scott Greenstone here. Feeling kind of overwhelmed by everything happening in local and national politics? Me too. Luckily, KUOW is hard at work bringing you the most important stories and conversations shaping our region and our democracy. Like Sound Politics, a new local podcast I co-host with Libby Dankman, and KUOW's partnership with A Braver Way, a podcast to help you face this divisive election year without losing heart. Hosted by Monica Guzman. Learn more at KUOW.org/elections.
You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. Addressing homelessness is looking a little different in Thurston County these days. The county, which includes Olympia, just became the 5th community in the nation to collect data on every single adult experiencing homelessness. The county's partner organization says that data includes the names and circumstances of each person counted. And the county vows to update the information monthly. It's part of a model called Built for Zero.
The idea is that if you can understand how people are entering into your system, understand why they're sitting in your system for different points in time, and then understanding what's hindering them from exiting the system. If you can do that in real time, you're better able to get people through coordinated entry more successfully and into the right kind of housing that they need to prevent them from re-entering homelessness.
That's Garrett Grainger, an urban sociologist and research associate at Manchester Metropolitan University. He says that the main idea behind Built for Zero is simple. If you have accurate and up-to-date information about the people your system is meant to serve, you'll be better able to serve them. Jurisdictions could also use that data to ask for greater government support.
One of the hypotheses that is kind of baked into Built for Zero is that if you have better information about resource gaps, that you can then lobby grantors for resources to fill those gaps.
But figuring out how to get this data and making sure it's accurate isn't easy. Keylee Marineau is the Homelessness Response Program Manager at Thurston County's Office of Housing and Homeless Prevention. She told me it's taken years for Thurston County to get this system in place and to make sure that every organization that touches outreach is working together effectively. But she says those years of effort have changed the county's understanding of its homelessness problem. The main picture, Thurston's unsheltered population is far larger than previous estimates. I sat down with Keylee to learn more about what's involved with this new process and how it compares to one of the primary ways most places tally their homeless population, the point-in-time count.
The point-in-time count is a whole nother beast. The point-in-time count, of course, being the annual census of people experiencing homelessness, both sheltered, unsheltered, and people in transitional housing programs. The HUD requires communities to do it at unsheltered count at least every other year. However, since we're part of the Balance of State has all of our, these 34 counties doing an unsheltered count on an annual basis rather than every other year.
So you're still going to be doing the point-in-time count as well?
We'll still be doing the point-in-time count,
Got it.
yes. However, our point-in-time count, and I don't have the numbers pulled up yet right now in front of me, was hovering around 800 or so people, compared with the 2,300 we know that we have.
Far fewer than what the by name count revealed. Wow.
Nearly 3 times more, because it's one time. It's during the coldest time of the year and darkest time of the year. And the theory being, well, everyone's going to be inside accessing programs, so that will be easier to account for people. People have to opt in to the survey. They have to want to take the survey. It's such a very heavy lift in terms of people power, time, planning, et cetera. And it's always historically an undercount. Especially they don't take into account, they being HUD, that those who are couch surfing and doubled up, those don't get accounted for in the actual PIT.
No one's going to be encountering them on the night where people fan out to go count.
Right.
So this data sounds like it's really complex to collect, and it's, involving a lot of collaboration, a lot of ongoing maintenance and hygiene of your data. How are you going to continue to keep it updated and keep it accurate? That just sounds like such a monumental challenge.
There's very clear processes that have been laid out about how we collect the data, who we're collecting it from. It's really complex. It's an ongoing, constant, monthly process that's now become a part of our system, and it's not going to change.
What made the county decide to make this switch? What was the reasoning behind it?
So I know that Built for Zero is something that our homeless service providers have been interested in since 2015. It was kind of new on the scene at the time, and they really saw value in this idea of, when you have quality data, then you can see who's coming into your system almost in real time and who is leaving your system and where they're going on a monthly basis. You can make incremental tests for change that can impact your system. Either it's going to really work for your system because you can see it in real time in the data. You can see that it's having a positive impact or it's having no impact. The other part of quality data in a by name list is weekly case consultations where 20, sometimes 30 providers get together. We pull the names from our by name list and we case consult every single person on that list so we know where they're going, and we brainstorm together. So it keeps our data clean on a weekly basis. We're doing this. So all of that, the case consulting and the using data to test for change, was really exciting in 2015. However, we couldn't get the rest of the community wasn't ready for it. It was 2021 when Providence St. Peter's regionally asked what community wants to try this, because we want to support Built for Zero in one of our communities. And so Providence St. Peter's, Olympia said, definitely our community. And so they reached out.
Raised their hand. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, they reached out first to City of Olympia, and City of Olympia was like, yeah. And then got the county involved. And then we really worked hard to get our provider buy-in. Homeless service providers don't necessarily love it when someone says, you're going to do this now and change the way you do business. So we spent a lot of time, several months, having meetings with Built for Zero with our homeless crisis response system so that everyone had buy-in. Because if you don't have buy-in, it's not going to go anywhere. So that momentum has just built over time. So yeah.
And for somebody who doesn't know the Built for Zero system, like you said, it's been spreading to communities all over the country and some internationally. What does it mean to participate in that? What does that bring, and what are the changes in kind of your stance and your footing in tackling homelessness that you're looking forward to in being part of the project?
Yeah, so one of the things that it brings some technical assistance and support. So we have people from Community Solutions. We have usually someone who's data focused that can work with us, provide TA, help us problem solve through things, and then a coach or two for our community. But I think one of the most vital and important tools that they have, which is actually a real pain, because it just took so long, was a list of 25 to 32 questions for our community to answer. And so the idea is asking very specific questions. Do you have a schedule and understand where every outreach entity is going out? Yes or no? Does your coordinated entry system or HMIS system have the ability to account for 90% of all people experiencing homelessness at any given time? Yes or no? That level of specificity in this process that we had to go through as a community. It took us 2 years to turn all of the questions from no to yes. And some of them were really hard, but we did manage to do it, and which is amazing because it made us really have to question how we do business. How do we do outreach? No, we don't have a community outreach policy. We don't have an inactive policy that the whole entire agency, let's implement these things and put them into practice. And then the questions would make us really have to stretch. And even if we came to a yes, the Built for Zero coaches would help us really dial it down. Is this really a yes? Or is there something in here that you actually need to circle back on? So we would problem solve with them on a monthly basis to see where we were in the process. And we got there.
You talked about the inactive list policy. What does it mean to be inactive, and how long does it take for somebody who might have been in your system, but you don't hear from for a while, to be considered inactive?
So in our county, and it varies, but it's very typically at 90 days. And what does that mean? It means that an individual who is in the system, is in our by name list, is in HMIS, they have not had any activity for 90 days. So there's nothing in their case notes. Nobody's had contact with them. Nobody knows where they are. So they are considered inactive and they're taken off the list. But what's important about that is that there could be someone who has engaged with them, but they're not putting it into the case notes, or they're just late on entering something into the system. And so that case consultation meeting is really important, both to identify people who are inactive and to say, wait, actually that person is active. I met with them yesterday. And then they're not taken off the list, because once you're off the list, you have to go through that process again.
Yeah.
Of intake. So
there's an awareness that, the inactive situation could lead to missing somebody, maybe an undercount, things like that. And you're taking steps to try to address that.
Yes, correct.
So what's going to be done with this data now that you have it, and now that you're working on keeping it updated? What happens in Thurston County moving forward?
The idea is to get to functional zero. And to be clear, we are specifically attempting to end homelessness or get to functional zero for the chronically homeless and veteran population. So those two very specific populations right now we're focusing on. Functional zero being, it's a abstract concept, but ostensibly we reduce the number of individuals entering the system to a very small number per month that can be matched with open housing referrals. So it's a slow reduce. We're in the reducing phase. So it's a slow reduction of the number of people, or the inflow of people into our homeless system, and a reduction in the number of people outflowing back into homelessness. So it's a kind of a dual reduction phase that we're in. And that can take however long it takes, because there still needs to be built enough housing for people.
Yeah. And talk to me about that. I mean, does Thurston County right now have enough shelter beds for every single one in that count, the by name count, let alone, long-term housing solutions? Like, what is the gap in services right now?
Oh boy. Well, no, we do not have enough shelter or permanent housing or temporary housing or transitional housing. I think that's true for most communities. And the gap is tremendous. If we have, 21 to, 2,300 people on a by name list, those are people that don't have places to go. So we don't have 2,300 extra shelter beds or 2,300 extra housing units. So
on a given night, how many open shelter beds would you say you have?
Just a handful. They're full. Usually,
which is reflected
capacity
in a lot of communities all over. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Are you hopeful that this more specific, detailed count will be something that lawmakers, that, policymakers can wrap their arms around and say, this is the true need? Now, how do we get the services that will meet it? We can't anymore say, that the issue with homelessness is, for example, service resistance, people saying they don't want to connect with services. When you see just this huge gap between the number who are unsheltered and the amount of beds available. What do you hope, I guess, is my question, will be done with this data at not just the homeless service provider level, but the policymaking level, the, state officials, county officials?
Yeah.
Federal officials, goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. Of course, this is data that can be hopefully very influential at the local, state, and federal level. These 5 communities that have quality by name information and a nearly in real time accounting of how many people are experiencing unsheltered homelessness, that should be used as the measure. That should be used as the measure for what's actually happening. The point in time count is an undercount. This type of deep dive and extraordinary effort to come to quality data is what needs to be paid attention to, I suppose. And I know that in our community, especially because we're in Olympia, that a lot of the folks that work at Commerce are very aware of what we're doing because they live here in Olympia, many of them, not all, of course. So I know that our lawmakers in our district are usually quite housing focused. So I'm hoping that this momentum of our success in Little Olympia, Washington, will have profound effects on the upcoming legislative session.
I am also hopeful of that. I'm curious to pick your brain on this. In June, the Supreme Court issued a ruling for the city of Grants Pass, Oregon versus Johnson. It allowed cities to enforce anti-camping bans in, the Ninth Circuit governed states, so they can enforce those anti-camping bans even if there are no available shelter options in the area. We're slowly seeing the results of that ruling with shifting policies. Earlier this month, the ACLU sued Spokane for its camping ban. Shortly after the Supreme Court ruling in California, the governor there issued an executive order telling state agencies to evict homeless encampments statewide if they pose a risk of life, health, and safety. What effect do you think the Grants Pass ruling could have on the ability of counties to address homelessness? And are you seeing any effects so far in your region?
So I'll answer backwards. We haven't seen the effects locally yet. We have a regional housing council that is comprised of elected officials representing Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, Yelm, and the county. And we have started asking the question of, does the Regional Housing Council have a unified stance, or is it going to be jurisdictionally based depending on the city's policies and preference? But we haven't heard anything definitively. I think I try to lead, and our system really leads from a trauma-informed space, operating from best practice almost across the board with low barrier housing first and trauma-informed and harm reductive services. That's in our policies. Commerce's guidelines also have that as a requirement. We really operate from that perspective. So the county, of course, holding all of the contracts for our providers, that is the tone of our community. So in the way that our community generally works with the homeless population or works on homeless response, I don't know what kind of policies will come down that will have a negative impact locally. However, as surrounding counties implement camping bans, whatnot, and we're less restrictive, we will see an influx, I'm sure, of people experiencing homelessness. But it's still, the jury's still out on how each jurisdiction will respond to it.
Yeah.
I have a million different thoughts and concerns about Grants Pass and the impact it's going to have, and basically just rolling back the clock.
How do you do it? How do you stay in this space? Because Keylee, you've been doing this for a long time, and I have reported on homelessness. I have dipped in and out of doing more on the ground reporting, but it is nothing like what you do day in and day out, being in the work. So how do you do it is my question. And how do your colleagues do it?
I don't know. No, people who are working in the homeless response field are generally very passionate about doing this for whatever reason. Some people come from lived experience. Some people have family members. Some people are just bent in this way. This is just the population of individuals that they really want to work with. I was a provider for many years, working with youth and young adults experiencing homelessness. And it was one of the most important things I've ever done in my life for me, for my own growth and my own awareness around my privilege, the politics, the reasons for homelessness, these individual people who are the most wonderful, strange, intelligent, creative, vital human beings. And so, it's kind of like when the personal becomes professional to a certain degree. I will say the politics is what is the most burning, like burnout. It's hard. There's one thing that I've noticed is when it comes to homelessness, there are subject matter experts. This is a discipline. Outreach is a discipline. Homeless response is a discipline. It has specific skills, has certain kinds of training, certain kinds of expertise that you need to have. And often when decisions are being made, the subject matter experts, no matter who they are not invited to the table, even if it's their job. And I've often said, if I had a legal matter I had to deal with, would I call a lawyer or would I call people who have strong opinions about law? If I had a wound, would I go to someone who has some really good ideas about how to fix a wound, or would I go to a doctor? It's so politically fraught that the subject matter experts are seen as annoyance, a barrier, too strongly, like they advocate too strongly. We just have to get this work done. And yet those are the people that know how to do the work. And another hill that I'll die on forever is that, some jurisdictions have their own homeless response teams, which is great fundamentally, but it will always be at odds with governing a jurisdiction. So best practice in addressing homelessness and homeless response is at odds with best practices in governing a community. You cannot make everyone happy and effectively address homelessness. And an elected body governing a community is very concerned with meeting the needs of as many people as possible. And they're balancing the needs of business owners and residents and homeowners, et cetera, which are often very much at odds with people experiencing homelessness. So it makes it really hard to balance those things. So there's always a conflict between homeless response system and providers and best practices and jurisdictions. That doesn't mean they can't get along. That doesn't mean you can't work together. We're doing a good job in Thurston County, I think, with the Regional Housing Council. But I think fundamentally there's just a rupture in the way that we do business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keylee Marineau is the Homeless Response Program Manager at Thurston County's Office of Housing and Homeless Prevention. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
And you're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. Thurston County isn't making this change alone. The transition to a data-driven, individualized approach to homeless outreach is part of the larger Built for Zero movement. Built for Zero was created by an organization called Community Solutions. It's based on the idea that a community can end homelessness for certain populations. So for Thurston County, that's people who are chronically homeless and military veterans. It's a concept that has picked up steam across the globe.
It's diffused to 105 homeless systems in the U.S. as of today. It's also diffused over to Canada, to France, Denmark, Australia, and the UK.
That's Garrett Grainger again with Manchester Metropolitan University. He told me that while the Built for Zero idea has taken off globally, there are still questions about its effectiveness. Most of the communities that have reached functional zero for a homeless population have been small and rural. These are places where the resources available might actually be enough to meet the needs of the unhoused population. And there haven't been a lot of studies about how Built for Zero, which Garrett calls BFZ, works long term.
I haven't seen any systematic studies of BFC impact that compares BFC communities with non-BFC communities that demonstrates higher performance on key system performance indicators like number of people who are first-time homeless, the median lengths of homelessness, returns to homelessness, and stuff like that.
That's not to say that the system doesn't work. Grainger just doesn't have the data on whether Built for Zero gets better results than non-Built for Zero communities. There's also another bump in the road, one that Keylee Marineau at Thurston County highlighted too. In places where the availability of resources, shelter beds, and housing are not equal to the needs of the homeless population, having more data won't necessarily mean more help.
If homelessness in a particular community is more of a political apathy issue than an administrative failure, then you can have the best data in the world. It's not necessarily going to cure the political apathy.
Without political action and services, data can only do so much. Thanks for listening to Soundside. And hey, this show is only possible because listeners support us. If you are able to give right now, check out the show notes for a link to donate. And don't forget, you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m., Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org.
Hi there, I'm Monica Guzman, host of A Braver Way podcast and your guide across the political divide. Are you done with the divisiveness in our politics and ready to do something about it? This season, we've partnered with KUOW to reach more listeners like you. Join me as I sit down with guests from across the political spectrum. Together, we'll share tools, insights, and messy, real-life stories to help you face this election year without losing heart. Listen to A Braver Way now on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.